On the day of the divorce, my ex-husband shoved a bank card at me like some pitiful handout. Humiliated, I flung it into a drawer and didn't touch it for 7 years. When I finally went to the bank to close the account, the teller said something that made the world go dark before my eyes. But before we begin, please share where you're listening from and how old you are. It always warms me to know who's with me in this moment. Enjoy the story. It was late October when Yegor Konstantinovich Bogorodsky sat in the corridor of the oncology center, watching fine Petersburg rain drizzle down the window in crooked trails. Marta's test results lay on his lap, 3 sheets of clinical text from which he understood the essential truth. Spinal cancer, terminal stage. Metastases had already spread through his body like spring cracks across ice. The oncologist, a middle-aged man with a wedge-shaped beard, spoke of palliative care and making the most of the remaining time, but Yegor barely heard him. One thought crowded out everything else, absurd for someone who had just received a death sentence. Will I change a lot outwardly? He interrupted the doctor. Will I look like a dying man? The oncologist paused, clearly taken aback, then slowly nodded and began listing the effects. Hair loss from chemotherapy, drastic weight loss to the point of emaciation, dependence on morphine pumps, probable paralysis of the lower body toward the end. I understand, Yegor said, standing and slipping the papers into his coat pocket. Thank you, doctor. You should talk to your family. Do you have a wife? Children? I have a wife. No children. He was already at the door, his voice distant, as if discussing strangers or the weather. Goodbye. In the corridor with its sharp antiseptic smell, he took out his phone and dialed Angelina. When she answered with her warm, slightly anxious hello, he forced a smile though everything inside him had turned to stone. Darling, the negotiations are dragging on. I'll stay in Moscow until tomorrow. The investors finally arrived. I can't leave them. A flicker of irritation crossed her voice, quickly replaced by acceptance. All right. Just remember to eat properly, not just those business lunches on the run. I promise. I love you. I love you too. He ended the call and stood for a long time at the window, staring at the November-grey Petersburg, the wet roofs, the rare passers-by below. The decision came not as a revelation but as something inevitable, born from a deep, almost animal knowledge of his wife. Angelina Mikhailovna fainted at the sight of blood. 3 years earlier, when he had cut himself on a broken jar at the dacha, she had gone so pale he had to bind his wound with one hand while holding her up with the other. She had cried for a week after a melodramatic film in which the heroine died of leukemia. If she knew the truth, she would abandon everything, the career she was only just building after university, her own life, to change his diapers, watch him vomit blood, hear him howl when the morphine stopped working. The image of her husband rotting alive would haunt her forever. Yegor pressed his forehead to the cold glass and closed his eyes. He would rather die alone, cursing himself, than let her endure that beside him. The next 3 weeks became a fever of preparation. He sold the company he had built from scratch, starting in a basement office on Vasilyevsky Island, to competitors for $200 million when its real value was $350. Rumors spread through Petersburg's business circles. Bogorodsky had either lost his mind, drowned in gambling debts, or was being blackmailed. Are you certain? The lawyer asked as they sat over documents. This is daylight robbery. I'm certain, Yegor replied, signing the last page. His hand trembled. The disease had reached fine motor skills, but he blamed nerves. I need cash now. 30 million went to his parents in Tosno, enough for the rest of their lives even if they lived another 20 years. The remaining 170 were placed on a premium bank card in Angelina Mikhailovna Bogorodskaya's name. Then, through a director acquaintance, he hired a 4th-year theatre student, 25,000 rubles for one scene. Sit in a car looking indifferent, scroll through her phone. She shrugged. Half an hour's work for that money. She was in. He knew his wife the way a watchmaker knows a mechanism he assembled himself. Angelina was fiercely proud beneath her emotional surface. If he simply left without explanation, she would suffer, search for reasons, blame herself, go mad from uncertainty. But if he appeared as a cruel traitor who abandoned a faithful wife for a young bohemian mistress, she would switch to hatred. Hatred worked better than grief as an anesthetic. It forced her to get up each morning to prove to the world, and herself, that she was worth something. And the card. If he told her there were 100 million on it, her pride would make her hurl it back in his face. So he would say there were only 100,000, offensively little, humiliating arms that would wound her pride just enough to keep the card as a trophy, a reminder of his vileness. Late November was raw even by Petersburg standards. The sky hung the color of wet asphalt. A fine, bone-chilling rain fell. Angelina emerged from the district court clutching the fresh divorce certificate. Jaeger stood by his black BMW, leaning against the hood in a light black cashmere coat that hid how much weight he had lost. He walked toward her, took a cigarette, though he had quit 3 years earlier, and drew on it. Then he pulled the card from his pocket and threw it at her feet into a puddle. It landed with a slap, splashing dirty water onto her dress hem. "Pin is my birthday," he said, voice stripped of feeling. It cost him everything not to break, not to falter. "There's 100,000. Take it and disappear. Don't ever cross my path again. Consider it payment for the wasted years." In the car, the young theater student sat scrolling her phone with bored superiority. Jaeger turned, got in, and drove away without looking back. Angelina stood in the cold drizzle, tears mixing with rain. Her first impulse was to pick up the cursed card and throw it after him, scream that she needed none of his charity, that she would sooner die under a bridge. But her legs would not move. Pride had already taken root. She had nothing, no decent apartment, only a rented room in a communal flat, a low-paying job selling fabric, a mother in Gatchina who needed medicines. Slowly she bent and picked up the card. Not from greed, from something else. It would be her trophy, proof of his cruelty. She would never spend that money. She would prove she could manage alone. In the car that turned the corner onto Gorokovaya Street, something very different happened. Jaeger pulled over. His body shook with a cough that tore at his lungs. He pressed a white handkerchief to his mouth. It came away crimson. "You okay?" The actress reached toward his shoulder. "Get out," he rasped. "I'll transfer the money. Go." She fled. Jaeger rested his head on the steering wheel and called Pyotr Medvedev, the only person he had told the truth. "She took the card," he said, voice strangled. Bent down and took it. "I thought I'd die right there. I wanted to run to her, fall at her knees, tell her everything. But if she felt how thin I've become, if she smelled it, she'd have understood. And then it would all have been for nothing." A week later he sold the car, the watches, the suits, everything tying him to his former life. Through intermediaries he rented a room in a crumbling Khrushchev-era block on Legovsky Prospect, in the same quarter where Angelina lived, literally across the street. It was not an apartment but a cell. Walls stained with old leaks, radiators that barely worked, the smell of cats and other people's cooking. A sagging sofa bed, a plastic table from the 90s, a stool. On the windowsill stood rows of orange medicine bottles. On the wall, in marker directly on the wallpaper, a schedule of morphine injections. In the corner by the window, on a makeshift stand of wooden blocks, stood binoculars pointed at Angelina's windows. Every morning, fighting pain that clawed his spine, Jaeger crawled to the stool and watched like a guardian spirit. He saw her hang laundry on the kitchen line, leave for work buttoning her old beige coat, stand at the bus stop huddling against the cold. In his diary, "Today Lena cut her hair short. It makes her look like the student I fell in love with 10 years ago. Same eyes. She still wears that coat. Why doesn't she buy a new one? I gave her the money. God, how I love her." Once he saw a man in glasses help her pick up a dropped bag at the stop. They exchanged a few words. She smiled, politely, distantly, but still a smile. Jaeger tore himself from the binoculars. His fingers shook not from illness but from something older, irrational. He slid to the floor, pounded the dirty linoleum, and sobbed like a child. "I have no right to be jealous. I pushed her away myself." Diary entry. "If he's a decent man, let him be with her. I'll be gone soon. She needs support. But why does it hurt so much?" 150 meters across Legovsky separated them geographically. An abyss of lies and misunderstanding separated them emotionally. Angelina believed her ex-husband was somewhere in Europe with his young mistress, drinking wine on a terrace overlooking the sea, laughing at her poverty. He was rotting alive 3 minutes walk away, watching through binoculars every evening when her windows lit up, the last source of warmth in his cooling darkness. Weeks flowed. Jaeger sank deeper into his strange, painful routine of observer, seeing everything yet having no right to intervene, no right even to remind her he existed. But watching was not enough. He wanted to protect, to spread straw wherever she might fall, even if she never knew. The first call from Piotr came in early December when a snowstorm swirled outside and the radiators had finally died. They found a thyroid tumor in her mother. Surgery needed urgently, $800,000. Jaeger lay on the sofa under 2 blankets and his old coat, staring at water-stained ceiling patterns like a map of an unknown continent. Every movement cost him waves of pain. Set it up through a charity fund, he croaked. A grant for regional residents. Let her think she won it. Within a week, Angelina received an official letter announcing she had won support from a Leningrad region program. Jaeger watched through binoculars as she stood at her window pressing the envelope to her breast, crying with happiness and relief, believing justice existed, that someone upstairs watched and rewarded those who deserved it. She did not know that justice lay across the street, coughing blood, gazing at her through old military binoculars. In January, an accident. Some local thug in a battered import rear-ended her scooter and began shouting, threatening lawsuits, boasting police connections, claiming she would pay for his bumper repair until she died. Jaeger learned from Piotr, who monitored at his request. He pulled a wad of cash from under the mattress, emergency money, since he could no longer walk to an ATM. $150,000. Find the guy. Make him come to her with apologies and compensation. Next day, the bully appeared pale and subdued with flowers and money, swearing it was all his fault. Angelina later told a friend over the phone, Jaeger caught fragments through an open window when the wind blew right, that finally the police were doing their job, that justice still existed. He smiled, watching her radiant face through binoculars, and wrote, "She believes in justice. Let her believe. It's more important than truth." The notebook he kept from the first day in that apartment was not accounting but a chronicle of love written by a dying hand on cheap paper. Dates, amounts, names of intermediaries, arrows showing how money flowed, how he arranged job interviews at a travel agency, 3 handshakes and 1 old debt, paid her landlord not to evict her when money ran out, called Piotr when her light stayed off 3 nights running. Her light is out again tonight. Second evening. Everything inside me is tearing apart. Call Piotr. Send something anonymously. From a neighbor. If she knows it's from me, she'll throw it in the trash. I know her. God, let it not be serious illness. Just a cold. Just exhaustion. Piotr brought broth and medicine, said it was from Baba Masha on the 4th floor who noticed the dark windows. Angelina thanked the unknown neighbor she didn't even recognize. Jaeger watched her drink his broth wrapped in a blanket on her kitchen chair and felt almost happy. As happy as a man whose insides are being eaten by invisible fire can feel. By February, morphine no longer worked. The body had adapted, increasing the dose was impossible. Pain became constant, thousands of red-hot needles in his spine day and night. He bit a towel so neighbors wouldn't hear. Walls with thin questions would lead to rumors, and rumors might reach her. Another night of spasms. He dictated to Piotr because he could no longer hold a pen. Wanted to cut off my leg just to stop it. But then I'd be even uglier. She'd be sick if she saw. Better to endure. Piotr set the notebook aside, voice breaking. Enough of this madness. Call her. 1 call and she'll come running. She loved you, damn it. No. You're dying. Exactly why no. One night in delirium from 40-degree fever he called her name. Lena, Lena, it's cold, hold me. He reached into emptiness where she used to curl against him. Piotr grabbed his wrist to keep him from falling. I'm here, hold on. Jaeger gripped with surprising strength, eyes fever bright. For a moment clarity returned. If I lose control, he whispered, each word an effort, if I try to call her, give me a sedative. Knock me out. I must not break. She has to hate me. Only then will she survive. Promise. I promise. On the final night a thunderstorm raged. Typical Petersburg. Wall of rain, lightning flashing white across the room, wind rattling window cracks, a downstairs door banging like a metronome. Help me sit, Jaeger asked. Piotr carefully propped him up, trying not to look at what his friend's body had become, skin and bones under grey, almost translucent skin. Jaeger looked across the street. Angelina's windows were dark. She slept, unaware this was the last night. So cold, he whispered. I want to go home. But I have no home anymore. I sold it myself. I drove her away myself. Piotr, I'm such a fool. You're not a fool. You're the most stubborn man I've known. That's the same thing, Piotr. The same thing. At dawn, When the storm quieted and first pale pink light touched the sky over the Neva, Yegor Konstantinovich Bogorodsky slipped away quietly, without agony. His eyes remained fixed on the window across the street where the woman he loved more than life slept. Pyotr cremated him according to instructions in a sealed envelope, and buried the ashes in a municipal cemetery in Pagalovo among nameless graves where no one brings flowers or lights candles. Only a name and dates on the marker, no epitaph, no words of love or loss. Yegor did not want her ever to find the place and weep over him. From the hill, the distant lights of Petersburg were visible, the city where his wife lived, unaware she had become a widow. 7 years passed. Angelina still lived in the same communal flat. Neighbors had changed twice. Stains on the walls had spread and taken on new shades of yellow and brown. She worked as an administrator in a small travel agency, low pay but steady. Her mother in Gatchina grew frailer. One morning the landlord gave an ultimatum. Pay 3 months' arrears by evening or be out on the street. In her purse, 2,000 rubles and some change, not enough for a week of food. Then she remembered the card. For 7 years the black plastic rectangle had lain at the bottom of a drawer beneath old receipts and photos from a life she could neither throw away nor look at. Sometimes she took it out, gripped it, reminded herself of the betrayal, of how she had survived without his handout, and put it back, teeth clenched. Today she would go to the bank, withdraw the pathetic 100,000, close the account, and turn the page forever. Let the money pay the rent. His final insult she would accept only because she had no choice. At a gleaming branch on Nevsky, a young teller took the battered card between 2 fingers, barely hiding distaste at the visitor's worn coat. She checked the account and froze. Her face shifted, confusion, shock, something like fear. She jumped up. 1 moment, please, and hurried behind a partition, heels clicking. Soon the branch manager emerged, wiping sweat with a handkerchief. Dear Angelina Mikhailovna, please come to the VIP area. Well, bring tea, coffee, whatever you'd like. They seated her on a leather sofa, brought cappuccino in a porcelain cup with gold rim. The manager sat opposite, nervously shuffling papers. You may not be aware, this is a special investment account with automatic compounding and complex interest. It was opened 7 years ago in your name. Angelina heard words through cotton wool. In short, the manager took a deep breath. With interest, dividends, and capitalization, the balance is 280 million rubles. The ceiling spun. Walls turned white. A roar filled her ears. 280 million, not 100,000 as he had said, throwing the card into the puddle. She left the bank and dialed the number she once knew by heart, the one that haunted her nightmares for months after the divorce. The subscriber is unavailable or outside the network coverage area. 5 times. 10. 15. Then she found Pyotr Medvedev's number in old contacts, the best friend who had witnessed their wedding. His voice was rough, hostile. She introduced herself, said she urgently needed Yegor Konstantinovich's new number. A heavy pause, labored breathing. You, 7 damn years, and now that you've found the money you remember? Now you need him? I don't understand. Come down to the cemetery and talk to him. Hez dead. Died 3 months after your divorce. Almost 7 years gone. The phone slipped from her fingers, cracked against the pavement. They met in a small cafe on Petrogradskaya where she and Yegor once loved to sit at the corner table planning a future that seemed endless. Pyotr had aged badly, thinning hair, deep lines, the exhausted eyes of someone carrying a burden too long. He lit cigarette after cigarette despite the no-smoking sign. Diagnosis: terminal spinal cancer with metastases. 3 to 4 months at most. Sale of the company for a fraction of its worth to get cash immediately. Hired actress for 25,000 to play the mistress outside the court. Apartment across from hers. Binoculars on the windowsill. Notebook recording every piece of luck he bought for her with his money. My fault, Pyotr said, not looking up from the table, smoke curling. I told him he was insane. She'd rather starve than take money from a trader. But if she kept it as proof of my vileness, one day she'd need it, and then she'd be safe. He even bet me you wouldn't spend a kopeck. He was right. He knew you better than you knew yourself. Show me the apartment, she said, voice hoarse. I need to see it. They drove to Legovsky. Pyotr led her through a trash-strewn courtyard reeking of damp, up a dark staircase with burnt-out bulbs to apartment 38. Inside was a torture chamber, not a home. Sagging sofa with protruding springs, plastic table ringed with old cup stains, stool by the window worn smooth. On the wall, morphine schedule scrawled directly on wallpaper. Empty medicine boxes, used syringes, blood-stained bandages in the corner. And the binoculars on the windowsill, old army issue with rubbed rubber eyepieces. Angelina raised them to her eyes and saw her own building, her kitchen, her laundry line where she hung washing every Saturday. He had been here the whole time. 100 meters away. She sank to her knees on the filthy floor and sobbed as she had not sobbed in 7 years, without restraint, without shame, without trying to appear strong. All those nights she lay cursing him, wishing him every misfortune. He had been 100 meters away, unable to sleep from pain and longing, biting a towel so she would not hear his screams. Piotr stood silently in the doorway, giving her space. What comfort could there be? Then he pulled a worn notebook from his coat pocket and a yellowed envelope. This is his diary, everything he thought and felt, day by day. And a video he recorded near the end, when he could still speak. On the envelope, in trembling, barely legible handwriting. To my wife. She sat on the floor clutching the envelope to her chest for a long time, not daring to open it, until Piotr touched her shoulder and said there was no electricity here. It had been cut off 7 years ago right after the funeral. The room had stood locked like a tomb ever since. They went to his small apartment on Vasilyevsky that smelled of tobacco and bachelor solitude. Old photos on the walls. The three of them, young, laughing, unsuspecting. Piotr inserted a flash drive into an ancient laptop, opened the file titled for Lena, and stepped onto the balcony to smoke. On screen appeared a man unrecognizable. Hollow cheeks under grey translucent skin, shaved head showing veins and age spots, collarbones jutting beneath the white shirt she had once given him for his birthday. The shirt now hung like a sack, underscoring what his body had become. But his eyes, warm, brown, full of love and everything he had never said aloud during those months of silence. Angelina, my former wife, the voice weak, hoarse, pausing for breath because even speaking hurt. If you're watching this, the grass on my grave is already knee-high, and Piotr finally worked up the courage to tell you everything. I probably look like a ghost. I asked Piotr to do my makeup, but his hands are all thumbs, so I look like a clown at a funeral. Don't be scared, all right? He tried to smile. It came out crooked but unmistakably his, the smile that once made her heart stop on their first date in a Nevsky cafe. He spoke for a long time, stopping to breathe, wincing from pain he could no longer hide. Told about the diagnosis, sitting in the clinic corridor watching grey rain. Realizing life was over. Deciding to hide it because he knew she would abandon everything to care for him and that image would stay with her forever. About fear of showing her his disintegrating body. About the girl in the car, an actress paid $25,000 for one scene who thought it was some prank or YouTube stunt. About vomiting blood in the car the moment they turned the corner. About betting on her pride. He knew she would not spend a kopeck and was right. It both gladdened and broke his heart. Don't cry, he said, voice cracking, clearly fighting tears himself. You get ugly when you cry, nose red, eyes puffy. And you have work tomorrow. Can't scare people. Spend the money on travel, good food, a decent life. Buy yourself a new coat finally. How long can you wear that beige horror? I hated it all 10 years of our marriage. Go to Sochi. We dreamed of the sea, remember? You said you wanted to wake to the sound of waves. He paused, gathering strength, swallowing air. Then quieter, almost a whisper. Find a good man, Angelina. You're young, beautiful, smart. You can't stay alone. Just don't put up with anyone who hurts you. You always deserved better than me. And then the promise, absurd, heartbreaking, that made her sob aloud, pressing her palm to the screen. If there's anything after death, it'll get in shape, quit smoking, become healthy and strong again, the way I was when we met. It'll wait for you, and well live the life we didn't get to this time. Up to 99 years, no illness, no lies, no parting. It'll wait for you at the end of the road, Lena. Don't hurry. Live long and happily, for both of us. When you come, tell me everything you saw. Deal? The screen went black. She sat with her face in her hands and cried as she had never cried, even that day outside the court when he threw the card into the puddle and drove off with the young beauty who turned out to be just a paid student. Next morning Piotr took her to the municipal cemetery in Pagalovo on the northern edge of the city. Metro, then bus, then a long walk along a broken road and overgrown path among rows of leaning wooden crosses and nameless mounds with metal tags instead of stones. Those buried here had no relatives or money, homeless, solitary old people, the unidentified. No one to mourn them. Jaeger's grave was among them. No fence, no marble, just a tin plaque with a black and white photo of him smiling that smile, and stark dates. Around it weeds grew knee-high. Last year's leaves lay untouched. No sign anyone had visited in 7 years. The contrast struck like a blow. The man who had given her nearly 300 million buried like a pauper, a nameless tramp no one remembered. Angelina fell to her knees in the mud, not noticing her coat soiled, and began tearing out weeds with bare hands, scratching skin to blood, breaking nails on roots. "Here's your money," she cried, pulling the black card from her bag and throwing it onto the grave. "Take your 280 million. Buy yourself a proper plot on Volkovskoy next to the writers. Why did you do this to me? Why didn't you tell me?" She screamed until her voice gave out, pounded the wet spring earth with her fists. Pyotr stood at a distance smoking, letting her pour out everything accumulated over 7 years beneath hatred and pride. "He chose this place himself," he said at last when she quieted to shuddering silent sobs. "Said from the hill you can see the city lights, your city. Wanted to be close to you even in death. I offered a proper plot, told him to leave money for his own funeral at least. He said, 'Not a kopeck on myself. A corpse doesn't care where it lies. She needs the money more.'" She picked up the card, wiped it on her coat, and put it back in her bag. She would not return it. Would not refuse it. She would live so his sacrifice had meaning. That was her debt now, her cross, her way of saying sorry. A week later she went to Tosno to see Jaeger's parents, whom she had not seen since the divorce. An hour and a half by suburban train past grey outskirts and datchas, past life flowing on unaware of her grief. The old house with apple trees, creaking porch, flowered curtains, all the same, only older and more worn, like its owners. Zinaida Pavlovna opened the door, saw Angelina, and clutched the jamb to keep from falling, face draining of colour. "Lord Lenocka, hello, Zinaida Pavlovna. I know about Jaeger. Pyotr Yevgenyevitch told me everything." The old couple wept, embracing her on the doorstep, all three clinging together. She wept with them, finally able to grieve together without hiding or pretending. "He came to us a month before the end," Zinaida Pavlovna recounted, voice breaking. "So thin, barely standing. Knelt right here and begged forgiveness for leaving first, for no grandchildren, for making us keep silent. He forbade us to call you. Said if we did you'd rush to him. He knew you, and he didn't want you to see him wasting away, screaming at night from pain. Promised we'd keep quiet even if you hated us. I dialed your number so many times," she sobbed, especially after the funeral when Pyotr brought the urn. "Thought I couldn't bear the silence anymore. But I remembered his eyes when he made us promise, and hung up. Forgive us, Lenocka. Forgive us if you can. We lost our son and couldn't even cry with you." Angelina held the old woman long, stroking her grey hair. "There's nothing to forgive. You kept his wish, as I kept it without knowing. Now we'll take care of you to the end of your days, the way he would have wanted." News of her sudden wealth spread through the city with frightening speed, growing in the telling. The phone rang off the hook, numbers silent for years suddenly alive, each caller feeling entitled to a share. A distant relative who 7 years ago refused $20,000 for her mother's medicine now wept about needing $15 million for a children's development center. A gold mine, you won't regret it. A former classmate who had mocked her when she cleaned offices now invited her to dinner to remember old times. "We missed you so much." A cousin who once sneered she should buy a decent skirt now begged $2 million to cover her son's gambling debts. Thiel cut off his fingers. "Those money don't smell of perfume," Angelina answered, voice ice cold, a tone she hadn't known she possessed, forged in 7 years of humiliation and solitude. "They smell of blood and pain. My husband died alone in a filthy room biting a towel so no one would hear him scream, all so I could live. I won't give a single kopeck to those who spat on me when I had nothing. Your son is not my problem." She hired a top attorney, one who handled serious fortunes, and created a family trust, shielding the money from claims, lawsuits, fraud. Half she bequeathed to Jaeger's parents for a dignified old age. House repairs, caregiver, medicines. Half went to a charity foundation for oncology patients, those who could not afford pain relief and died in agony. Every month she anonymously transferred funds to the very oncology center where Jaeger received his diagnosis, for morphine and palliative care for those dying alone like her husband, biting pillows so as not to wake neighbors. Each ampoule bought with that money meant a little less suffering for someone. It was Jaeger's continuation in the world. That winter she dreamed a dream so vivid she woke unsure where she was. She stood again outside the court building, but instead of cold November rain, soft snow fell, blanketing the city white. Jaeger approached not in the black cashmere coat but in the thick-knit sweater from the night they met at a mutual friend's party. Healthy, young, broad-shouldered, smiling the smile she thought she had forgotten. He opened his arms and hugged her tightly. She heard his living, strong heartbeat. "Forgive me," he whispered into her hair, breath warm. "Forgive me for not telling you. For making you hate me. I thought it would be better. I was an idiot." "You were," she said, clutching his sweater. "The biggest idiot in the world." "I never went anywhere," he said, stroking her hair. "I was always close, across the street, watching your window every morning, counting your smiles, dying again when you cried. Don't cry anymore. When you cry, I can't rest." He drew back and looked into her eyes, full of the love she thought lost forever. Live, Lena. Travel, laugh, eat good food, wear beautiful dresses. I want to see you happy, even from there. He began to dissolve into the snowfall, silhouette growing transparent. "I'll wait for you at the end of the road." His voice echoed distantly between buildings. "Don't hurry. We have eternity ahead." She woke with tears on her face but for the first time in years without the lead weight on her chest. May. Sochi. The promenade bathed in evening sun, scent of sea and blooming magnolias. A cafe overlooking the water, the sea they had dreamed of seeing together. Angelina sat at a table by the railing. Before her stood 2 glasses of wine, one hers, one for the empty chair opposite, his old sweater draped over the back. The black card lay beside the glass. "You see," she said quietly to the empty chair, "I'm spending your money. Living in a good hotel with sea view, like you wanted. Bought dresses, red ones, the color you loved. Of course I still dress like a pauper out of habit. 7 years don't vanish overnight, but I'm working on it. You'd scold me, I know." Sea wind played with her grown-out hair. On her finger she still wore the wedding ring she had never removed and never would. She had not remarried. Men had tried, some sincerely, some for money, some out of curiosity about the rich widow. But each time someone took her hand she compared, and the living never measured up. The love she had lived through was too deep, too painful, too real. After that, one could not fall in love again, only learn to live carrying that love inside like part of oneself. She rose and walked along the promenade past palms and laughing vacationers, past children with ice cream and couples in love. The sun sank, painting the sea gold and purple. Her shadow on the warm stones was long and solitary, but unbowed, unbroken by the weight of the past. Jaeger was waiting at the end of the road, somewhere beyond the horizon where sun meets sea, where there is no more pain or lies, where they would finally be together. And one day, many years from now, after a full, happy life, she would come to him and tell him about everything she had seen, every place she visited for both of them, every sunset she watched with his eyes. Until then she lived, for herself and for him.